Cattle Call Podcast, November 1st, 2020. Doing a quick smoke and mirrors on October 2020. I'm Isaac Weston. I'm the host of Cattle Call Podcast, and thank you for listening in. Real quickly, before I start, just want to say a big thank you to everyone who has listened. Put out a lot of material in October, and I've yet to release the next podcast that I also recorded in October because it'll come out in November. But just put out a lot of material and got a lot of good feedback. Did a special edition called Good, Bad, and Ugly, based off of the movie title, the Clint Eastwood Western, and just kind of reflection on America. Did it the night of the vice presidential debate, but got a lot of good feedback on it. So I just want to say I do appreciate everyone who does listen and, encouraging texts or people following up about certain thoughts or identifying with it, whatever it is. I always enjoy and need feedback, whether that's stuff like reviews, whether that's stuff like personal texts or messages or comments on Facebook or Instagram or whatever it is, just trying to get better and want to get better every single time I record. So just want to say a quick thank you for that. Thank you to everybody. So this is Smoke and Mirrors. If anyone is joining us who's never listened to Smoke and Mirrors before, it is my monthly monologue. I put out the first of every month as a reflection for the month before. It's called Smoke and Mirrors because I smoke a cigar, and mirrors, reflection, plays off the expression. This is a pretty big one because not only did I have a lot of great guests, but I had a lot of no cigars in the month of October. So I have my first cigar again, which is nice. So I did Sober October and was actually very enjoyable. Didn't really think much about it. Would definitely recommend people do it. People talk about doing different things for, November or December. Or I just learned about something called Dry Jan, which is like in January, people don't drink alcohol for the month. It's good, even if you don't overindulge. It's just kind of nice to exercise a little bit of discipline. So I really enjoyed it. Stayed faithful to it. Had my first alcoholic beverage this afternoon watching the Chiefs game when they beat the Jets. Go Chiefs. So yeah, it was nice. It was a good little Sober October. Definitely encourage it. All right, want to open us up here with a quote, and then I'll do a little reflection on all the guests. So for the month of October, there were a lot of people I kind of felt like I formed more of an attachment to. Of course, not people that I know, but different figures, whether they're historical, whether they're spiritual or even personal or whatever it is. One that I've really gotten to like the last, I guess coming up on 6 months now, that I've really come to like is Ulysses S. Grant. He was the Union war general for the Civil War, and he's a very cool story. So History did a very good documentary. It was like a drama documentary, kind of 3 parts where they talked about just his life. So he was the 18th president, but before that, he was the Union War general, and before that, he was a nobody. Then before that, he was a war hero. So he ended up getting kicked out of the military for being a drunk. Kind of comes in fitting, I guess, with Sober October. You don't want to be a slave to anything, so just proving that you aren't, taking some time away from it. But he was a drunk, and went to West Point, served in the military, got kicked out of the military for his drinking habits, and then later when the Union was getting smacked by the Confederacy, Lincoln reached out to him to come fight, or first someone else reached out to him to come fight. He joined the Union, started fighting for the Union. He was the only Union general winning any battles, and that's when President Lincoln called him in and said, "Hey, would you be the Union general? You're our only hope to win this war." And he did it. Here's a quote by Ulysses S. Grant I like. It says, "Hold fast to the Bible. To the influence of this book, we are indebted for all the progress made in true civilization, and to this we must look as our guide in the future." So he said, hold fast to the Bible. To the influence of this book, we are indebted for all the progress made in true civilization, and to this we must look as our guide in the future. Now, a lot of people may not read the Bible, like the Bible, believe in it, think it's true, whatever. Personally, I do. I do think it's true. I think it's the most powerful piece of literature to have ever existed in the world. And because of that, that's one reason I like that quote. But another thing I like is Ulysses S. Grant lived in the 1800s, 19th century. And he's saying this about 150 years ago. Now, any progress we had made up into that point, he credits to the Bible. And one could argue we've made way more progress proportionately in the last 150 years. And think of all the great strides, the leaps and bounds we've made as societies, as civilizations. We have to maintain. Where there's this urge for this constant change. And change is good at times. There's times where it is good for sure. But we also do need to maintain. We do need to conserve something that has worked, and we need that guide. And I talk about it in a couple different episodes about, your convictions and following them and acting on them. So I just wanted to start the episode with this quote. Okay. First guest I'm going to reflect on is Kristen Lusby. Now, Kristen and I have known each other for a little longer than a year and a half now. Yeah, a little bit longer than that. And I have only hung out with her a handful of times, including the podcast. I don't know her all that well, but at the same time, from the first time her and I ever had a conversation, we really clicked, we really connected. I walked away from that conversation feeling like, okay, this is somebody I connected with. This is somebody I would want to talk to more. And then I wouldn't see her for a while. And then once I did see her again, we'd talk for a couple hours. Then I wouldn't see her for a while. Then I'd see her again, and we'd talk for a couple hours. That's kind of how it went. But we're able to get real deep real quickly. So I'm very thankful for that. I'm thankful that she came on. She's had a lot of good things to say. She has a great personality. Just fun person to talk to. The only, I guess, concern, and it's not with her, but it's just with what was going on at the time and with the episode and everything. So with the world we're in today, I talk a lot about cancel culture just because I'm sick and tired of it. There's a lot of stuff that her and I talk about that we're not able to talk about. You can say anything. You can say anything you want. Little tangent. Ricky Gervais, the comedian, he talks about, all these comedians nowadays are saying, oh no, we can't talk about these topics. We can't joke about that. We can't cover that. And that's when he steps in and Ricky Gervais is like, yeah, you can. You absolutely can. Now, you're going to have to face the repercussions of it. A lot of people may not like it. There's a chance that they could cancel your show or, quit selling your tickets or not want you at their venue, whatever it is. But, you can't give into that fear that, I can't say certain things now because, the public doesn't like it or whatever it is. And usually it's not even the public, which I'll get more into. It's usually just a handful of people, and they're the ones that are making all the noise. So anyway, with Kristen and I, there's just certain topics that, if you put out your perspective on it or your views on it, even if you have a like-minded audience, all it takes is one person who doesn't like what you had to say, and that's game over. So it's just kind of tough because what we're seeing, this censorship. And that's one of my deals is like, hey, I'm not going to censor anything you say. As long as you don't cuss, you can come on here and say anything. In fact, Christian and I want to have like an open discussion about like a biblical view of sex in the future. So it'll be a pretty mature episode, but it needs to be some real conversations about, what are we missing? What are we getting wrong as Christians, but also just like in America, like the view of sexuality. So we're going to talk about that in the future. So I want to be open and honest and talk about things. That's the only way we can get stuff fixed. But it also is just tough when I'll let you come on and say whatever you want. But then, my guests have to leave here and they go, okay, there are implications because if I say this and it gets out to one person who doesn't like it, that'll be my head. So I have to pull back. And that's just tough. It's a shame that that's how far we've gotten, which is amazing because we've been so progressive and we've been so noble in our cause of giving everybody a voice, and everybody matters no matter what you believe or what you look like or whatever it is, pick a thing. And everybody has value. but we become so progressive that we cancel people, and we become so tolerant that we shut the mouths of people who don't sound like us. That's a scary place to be. Overall, Kristen did a great job. Loved hearing her take. Loved how open and vulnerable she was about mental health and being bullied and stuff like that in her past. I hope that resonated with people. Very thankful to have her on. Just thankful to have been able to hang out with her, and hoping to have her back on very, very soon, talking about things. So, Kristen, if you're listening, thank you very much for coming on. That's Kristen Lusby. You can go check out her episode called Kristen Lusby. Okay, now on to Josh Vinson. Josh and I have known each other for a few years. We met in journalism school at the University of Memphis. Uh-oh, cigar's going out. That is not good news. See, haven't had practice in a month here. Oh, there we go. So Josh I met in journalism school. Josh is a very, 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 very talented guy. Ooh, wow. Voice crack. A very talented guy. And he had just moved back to Memphis when I reached out to him about something. Can't remember what we were talking about. So it was great that he's back in town, so he could have come on. We could talk. Longest one I've had. Two episodes, 2.5 hours about, and he did a very, very good job. One thing I was very appreciative of with Josh is that he was open and honest about everything. He's one of those guys I can go to and I just, okay, help me understand this, help me understand that, and he'll be honest. And he has a great sense of humor, so just joking around. Kind of going back to the censorship I was talking about with Kristen. So Josh thinks differently politically than Kristen. However, because of his position working in media, he can't talk about where he works, what he does, even promote his episode to the point of, hey, go ahead and listen to it, because people will take that as fact, or he loses credibility. So even there, him being on the other side politically, he is still, in a way, experiencing a form of censorship, which is just crazy. It just is. So, him and I talked before, and we talked after, and there's stuff like, all right, well, he can't talk about where he works or what he does or exactly what stations, and like some of the work that he's doing, just because he doesn't want that to conflict. Like, then it's like, look at him. There's his bias. His bias is showing, because he's trying to do his job professionally. So it's kind of a shame we have to draw these lines. But overall, very thankful for Josh and just his insight. So if you haven't listened to it, we talked a lot in the second episode about like the big issues, what is white privilege, what is systematic racism, stuff like oppression, politics and sports, whatever it is, police brutality, defunding the police, yada, 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 all the kind of stuff you're hearing about on the news. Okay, talk about what that is, what you believe that is, and define it. So just a quick thing that I've kind of been learning throughout the podcast and a little bit prior to that is just how important it is for us to define things. We have to define things. We have to. Words have meaning. And that was kind of the theme of Josh's episode, is he kept saying words matter. And they do. They absolutely do. So I'm glad he continued to reiterate that point about words mattering, because they do. With that being said, it's very important that we realize, okay, when this term, here's one of these buzzwords, when they're thrown out, what exactly do they mean? Because we have to define when someone says something like white privilege, because that was something I wanted to hear defined. Okay, everyone's talking about it. You work in media. They talk a lot about it. You're a black guy. What is white privilege? You're from Chicago, where you're seeing some stuff. What's white privilege? Okay, if you can define it, now I know your stance on it. Now I know what you think it is. And if that truly is what it is for any word, if you can define that word, now we can have a discussion about it. The same with people say, Marxist or socialist or communist or capitalist or whatever you want to say. Okay, what exactly is that? What do you mean? What is Marxism? What does Marxist mean? Let's define that. So you don't say, oh, that's a Marxist movement, or colleges just produce a bunch of Marxism ideologies. They indoctrinate our kids with Marxism. Okay, well, what is Let's talk about that. Because if you have the wrong definition of it, you're going to miss the point completely. But if you have the right definition, now we can have a real discussion. Because if they are, and we've defined it, here's what it is. And now we can look at what, let's say, an organization or a college or something is doing. Okay, if that's what Marxism means, then yes, this institution is doing it. If that's not what Marxism means, then no, it's not. You're missing the point here. So that was a very good just takeaway from that. And people reached out to me about Josh, just saying how they were thankful that we had that discussion and they learned a lot. And that's questions that people wanted to ask but never have had the opportunity, or maybe were apprehensive to. I get that. So I'm thankful to have had Josh on to talk about it. Becka, that was a fun one. Yeah, one thing I do love about the podcasting, I probably mentioned this at some point, I feel so much closer to a person after I have them on for an episode. I may have known them a little, or even argue that I know them decently well, enjoy being around them, have hung around them, whatever it is. But when you go through that episode and you come out the other side, you feel so close, and you feel like, man, I know so much more about a person. And then when you see stuff like, whether you're texting them or you see it on social media, or you just see it in life, and you go, okay, I know why they said that. Or, hey, that's what they were telling me about, and now I'm seeing it play out. That is such a cool experience. And that's kind of how it was with Becka, where I knew her a little bit. And then KK, her roommate who was out there with us, I only met her like once. Didn't really know her all that well, but got to hang out with them for the evening and just had a great time and getting to hear their take. And so and everyone brings such a valid point, Kristen, I can take a good perspective on, okay, like just the stance of a woman, what her views are. Kristen provides a good lens for me to be able to empathize. Josh, for Black America / media, I learned a lot about media talking to Josh. That's so nice. That was such a blessing. And then Becka learned more about art, and not just the importance of it, but almost like the urgency, why we need it, why it needs to be taught, more of how it is breaking down barriers, how it's giving kids this creative outlet. I'm not sure if anyone's seen the Social Dilemma on Netflix. I'm sure you have, because it's been out for a while. I watched it twice in October. I watched a ton of great documentaries, but watched the Social Dilemma a couple times, and that was such a great documentary. And even showing those rise in technology in our society, at the same time, that's helping stump the creativity of students and young people. And one thing Becka was talking about was just where we're seeing this creativity kind of tail off. But when these kids are, in this juvenile detention center, how much they're growing and uniting over doing art. How cool that is. And, okay, there really is a need for it. And they're even making the point about how, in the West at least, our view of art has come through the experiences of like old white men, which I know that gets thrown around a lot. Everyone's like, oh, everything, it's always like an old white man problem, or they're either the cause of the problem, or like they're the boogeyman. They're actually not, but it's easy to say old white man. But when she started talking about it, it's like, wait a second, I can't name one female artist. And really, with the exception of going to like different, exhibits where they'll have like different installations of, maybe a certain topic, okay, it'd be like Deep South Black artists. If it's not something like that, then I'm not really, I guess, susceptible to seeing their work that often. So that was just a good point to make, like, wait a second, that's true. And if you're going to have a real diverse class, like my mom's a school teacher, and some of her classes have been so unbelievably diverse that these kids might want somebody that understands where they come from and their background, and even too, not just what color they are and what gender they are, but what kind of art they do. Because if you don't like this certain era, then you're not gonna care about this guy. So just the importance for having, in that context, how having this diversity in order to reach these kids, how important that is. So that was just a great takeaway. So Becka, thank you very much for coming on. I'm excited to have KK on and hang out with you guys again soon. Pierce, that was a good one. That was not impulsive. We talked a couple days earlier and then had a real quick free evening to do a podcast. And it was fun hanging out with Pierce. I got to know Pierce about 4 years ago. He was on my intramural football team. And, man, we were so good. That team was, I don't really talk about it, I guess, but, man, that team was so good. We absolutely balled. We lost the game before the championship. That was rough. But, yeah, we had a good time. So Pierce, I got to meet, 4 years ago. He was a freshman in college, was playing lacrosse. He was kind of doing intramural football for fun, but kind of to keep in shape from what I remember. But we would go hang out afterwards, and we'd talk about God. And he wasn't a Christian at the time. And he ended up becoming a Christian later. Later that year, he became a Christian, went on a summer project immediately after. And it's just cool. Pierce is he's a real nice kid, very, very nice kid, very talented, very ambitious. So it's cool being around people like that. If you are a creative person, not from like a narcissist, oh yeah, so creative, but like if you work in any hobbies that are creative, whether it's like any form of design or art, Pierce is doing music. He plays music, he writes music, he performs music, he helps produce music, but he also wants to act. He also works in sports. So he's doing a lot of different creative stuff within music and with film and audio. So he's doing video, audio, a lot of different things like that. It's just nice being around people that are also interested in that kind of stuff and being creative, because it kind of helps you get your juices going and just encouraging to be around other people that are also trying to do the same stuff you are. So that was just a nice treat, but it's also nice hanging around Pierce and seeing just how his life has changed since I knew him before he became a Christian and now that he is one. And so we just had a good conversation, and it was, like I said, kind of last minute, but I was really glad to have him on. So Pierce, thank you very much for coming on. Come on anytime. Hopefully you'll be famous here very soon. All right, and then one that hasn't come out yet was Luke Riley. It'll come out here next Friday, November 6th. I'm just going to give a little promo for it. Luke Riley, he's a golf pro. And that was a great, I haven't listened to it yet, but that was a great episode. One of my favorite. I know I say that every single time, but that was one where I got done. And from just a podcasting, like me hosting a podcast, having a guest on, that's one of those episodes when I got done, I go, all right, that was what I kind of envisioned when I planned this podcast. So I'm excited to have that one come out. Luke he's a very, very humble guy, very nice guy, has a lot of great things to say. That'll be exciting. Okay, so here's how I kind of want to close the episode. We have the presidential election in 2 days. I'm recording this on a Sunday night, or Sunday afternoon, but with daylight savings, it feels like it's nighttime. And Tuesday, November 3rd, is the 2020 presidential election between Democrat candidate Joe Biden, Kamala Harris as running mate, and then Republican incumbent Donald Trump and Mike Pence as running mate. This is crazy time. Election years are crazy. I want to read very quickly a part of a blog that I wrote that I released. I first got into blogging before I did any of this stuff. I was just writing, just enjoy writing. But this is a blog I released on Inauguration Day in 2017. So January, 20th, 2017. I'm not going to read it all. You can find it on my WordPress. I can put something up so people are able to find it. But it is called Trump Under America and America Under God. So I just want to read a couple things from it. Maybe not even verbatim, but kind of what my point was. And honestly, I don't really go back and read my work. So when I read it right before I recorded, it had been the first time, and coming up on 4 years. And I was like, man, what was I doing? I was goofing around a lot as a writer, but I was young writer. First about the title, Trump under America and America under God. The role of the president, no matter who's elected, is to serve the American people. So as a reminder to us, and what we need to be doing as citizens to hold people in power accountable, is they're here to serve us. We are not here as citizens to be like, all right, like whatever you say goes, and we'll just follow. Like, we have laws, we have a constitution, we have people that have written, implemented, and enforced the law, and now their role is to just uphold that and serve us and go, okay, here's what the people need. Let me serve them. Let me protect them. Let me provide an atmosphere where they're able to live, work, play, eat, drink, shop, whatever, man, whatever it is. That's the role. So Trump is under America was kind of what I was talking about. And what the book I was reading at the time was Kingdom Man by Dr. Tony Evans. He's a pastor out of Dallas. And he was talking about marriage and what the role of the man is when God designed man. And yeah, man is the leader. He's the head of the household. But only if he aligns himself with the headship of Christ. So the same with the president. The president is like, he's the father of the country. He's the shepherd of the flock. He's supposed to oversee it. But if he has no higher authority that he's submitting to, and he's just left to his own devices, then stuff can go wild. So he's supposed to be working for us, and we, therefore, can follow and submit to him only if he is submitting to something higher than himself, which we saw with Amy Coney Barrett. If you watched any of her confirmation hearings, she would never give her personal take and personal Amy Coney Barrett convictions on certain issues. She was saying her job, if she is the Supreme Court Justice, and now she is, her job is to determine the constitutionality of it. And if it's not constitutional, you shoot it down. And if it is, you uphold it. And it's not my preference. It's, hey, I know what I believe and I know what I think, but that's not my job. I report to the Constitution. So that's kind of the role of the president. So no matter who wins, remember that. Secondly, one thing I was talking about that actually I would probably argue is more true today was talking about the individual accountability. I just want to read one of my quotes in here. It says, how do we go about submitting to the Lord as a nation? Well, it starts at the individual level, of course, but the greatest impact made on the individual is in the home. If you want to fight racism, impoverishment, hunger, lack of education, corruption, greed, and any other form of brokenness, it begins with in-home discipleship. Nobody goes through 18 years of a gospel-centered upbringing, then upon the election of a leader, throws away everything they know and becomes a racist. One person's non-spirit-led comments cannot change the lifestyle, perspective, and actions of nearly 320 million people, especially if there are persons in the mix who have the Holy Spirit dwelling in them. They can discern. And if you are in fear of President Trump creating a monster out of your kid, then step up and teach your children the correct way to go about their life. I quoted Proverbs 22:6, which says something along the lines of, raise a child in the way they should go. Even when they are old, they will not turn from it. Something along those lines. Every leader we will ever have on earth will have flaws, imperfections, shortcomings, struggles, blind spots, and obvious sins. Both candidates showed us that this past election. Don't use the brokenness of a leader to write off the poor character of someone else walking the streets with you. It is not the president's responsibility to sit down at your dining room table and lead your children, friends, or anyone else in your sphere of influence through life. It is the president's job to create a country where you have the ability to do that. And I go on to talk about more things. So the idea is, no matter which way you're going to vote here on Tuesday, no matter whenever we do find the election results, or whenever we find it out, no matter who wins, whether it was your guy or not, or if you're right down the middle and you think we lose either way, change from within. We have to change from within. You can take your own individual accountability. You can raise your kids. You can talk to your friends and make impressions on people that will help that change. Not the role of a president is to not set an example that's saying, hey, I'm doing this. And I get the argument. You go, oh, well, if the president, the person, the highest power in the land can do that, then anyone else is going to do anything they want because that's their baseline. Yeah, I get that argument. But at the same time, that can't be justifiable. If you know something is wrong and the person who's the highest authority in the land is doing something that's wrong, that's not your justification for, oh, now I can do anything that's wrong because clearly it's okay. Or there's not going to be a consequence. It's still wrong no matter what. So take some individual accountability. Raise your kids in a way that, hey, I've been taught this for so long that when I left the house, when I went to college, when I got my first job, when I had my first kid, I didn't throw that all away because a presidential candidate said something mean. Whoever it is, they all say stupid things. Take individual accountability. We have to change from within. So last thing I'm going to end it on is another quote. And it's Matthew McConaughey. Got really into my man Matthew McConaughey this month. He was talking in an interview about the role of a dog and its tail. It's a classic Matthew McConaughey. He has so many just strange expressions, but when he elaborates on it, you go, okay, that kind of makes sense. He's talking about the dog wagging his tail and the tail and the dog, and which one do I want to be? I don't know what he's talking about. But one thing he was saying was, I'm not saying that as a pride thing, but it's a right I pay a lot of respect to. You've got to watch in life who's wagging who. Is the dog wagging the tail or the tail wagging the dog? I've noticed the tail wagging me from time to time, and I have to say, hold on, I want to be the one doing the wagging. Which kind of seems like a strange quote, but in a prior interview, that's from Cigar Aficionado in 2018, he also did one in 2011 or 2012, and he was talking about politics for a second, and one thing he was saying was, he said, public opinion is the tail wagging the dog, which is the law. It should be inverted. We elect these people because they supposedly know the law. Experts supposedly make the law. Judges are judges because they're supposed to know the law. But when the public shouts first, public opinion creates a verdict before something even gets to court. So the importance of that is either way, there's movement. The dog itself is moving, it's shaking, it's wagging. But is the dog the one in control, wagging the tail? Or is the tail wagging the dog, meaning the dog's now out of control? There is law. There is an order to things. There is a design to things. What's happening is we're getting rid of that to appease the feelings of people and identity crises. That's pretty much what's going on. Here's what we have set up. Here's what we need to maintain. Here's what our civilization and our society has designed that we need to conserve because it works. And that's the tail wagging the dog. No matter who wins this election, remember we are Americans first. If we want unity as a country, it has to change from within. Do it in your house. Do it with your friends. Do it with people who don't think like you. That's one thing. Josh and I do not agree on about anything politically, but him and I had so many great discussions that we'll talk it through and we'll start the conversation on polar ends of the spectrum. And when the time we get done with the conversation, we realize there was only about one little component to that entire issue that him and I disagreed on. And it may have been like in a different context that would have been right, or in a different context that would have been wrong, whatever. And it usually comes down to, oh, so we really don't disagree that much. It's just that one thing is what we have an issue on. So we can compromise. There can be unity. It just has to happen from within. Thank you guys for listening. I'll see you on the other side.